Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you've been having a great time. I have. You've been learning a lot. I am going to do something slightly unorthodox. As you know, we have Þorbjörg here, who's the Minister of Justice for Iceland, but she has to go and vote at Parliament in a few minutes. So I'm going to quickly ask her a question so she can run. This conversation is important, but I do think it's important that we hear from her and then we continue the conversation. Is everyone cool with that? Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going to ask you all very quickly about who you saw in your career early on that let you know that this path was possible. What you're doing is feasible, you're not dreaming, you're not thinking silly, that the job you're doing now is something that is possible for you.
And yeah, sorry about me running away after 5 minutes.
Yes.
It would be impossible to sit here as a woman from Iceland and not mentioning Vigdís Finnbogadóttir, first democratically elected president worldwide as early on as 1980. I was born in 1978, so I obviously don't remember this. But not only was she the first woman, she was a single mother at the time, nothing in her background. She came from the arts and the theater that told us that or told society that this would be an obvious outcome. She then sat as president for a very long time, and I think for all Icelandic women, she's the obvious choice. When I speak as a lawyer, I would say the story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes, thank you. Okay, do you want to? Oh, we should let her go. Fine. Okay, so because Kenya and Nigeria...
They're voting about a bill of mine, so
yes,
it would be
course.
ridiculous of me not to support it.
100%. So because Kenya and Nigeria are making certain strides, we want to make sure that we're also learning from... I don't want to say mistakes or stumbling blocks or things that we didn't see, that our predecessors didn't see in their fight to justice and to seeing more women in leadership and seeing more women in prominent roles. So the question that I have for you is, from the experience that Iceland has had, your history and the strides you've made, what are roadblocks or lessons that you think could be learned about making institutional change in order to access how often we're seeing women in leadership?
Mm-hmm. I mean, when you look at Iceland's result, we are world champions when it comes to gender equality, and we've been for a very long time. To me, it's obvious that the root of the success is the Icelandic women's movement. In addition to that, I would say that we have been we've had the fortune that women in politics, not just in parliament, but in politics in general, have had the courage to work together, whether they've been on the right side or left side, liberals or conservatives. Women have more or less been united when it has come to working on issues of women. One of the threats now towards our success is if this were to change. And so that I see as the two underlying themes of how to do things. People working together. But at the moment, I'm always preoccupied with the reality of, as Minister of Justice and Minister of Equality, is this Nordic paradox of we have plenty of women leaders. We have maternal and paternal leaves. We have a good school system when it comes to men and women and equality. But still we have this paradox of gender-based violence being ridiculously common in our society. And this is and will be our main focus point until that we have had better success in that regard.
Thank you so much.
I know, I have to jump.
Thank you so much, Þorbjörg, for being here.
And thank you. And sorry.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for that encouragement. So I guess I can do like a little proper intro now. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. How are we feeling? I hope we're feeling excellently well. I'm very, very pleased about this panel. As someone who works in media, and mixed media for that. I know what it means for everyone to see women in office, to see women speaking publicly, to see women taking a stand, to see women creating legislation, to see women being part of society in a way that is marked and different and honest. Right? I think it's really, really important, and I'm very, very pleased to be speaking to two women who have done instrumental, amazing things in their career. I think we're going to have a lovely conversation, and yeah, thank you for being here. All right. First of all, I do want to ask a question. So I believe that there's an open poll that's been running, and so I'm going to ask the audience. What do you picture when you see a competent leader in your sector? Do you see gender? Is it male? Is it female? Does it not matter? Do you see more than one gender? What does that look like? And with that, I will ask the same question that I asked Þorbjörg to the both of you. So, Bolaji, who did you see in your career early on that let you know the path you're on now as head of a bank is possible?
So I have a different story, so I would go to my background, but I want to say thank you for this opportunity. So I think the easy thing to look at is I come from a family of 7 children. There are 6 girls and 1 boy. So my mom is a very strong person. My siblings are all strong. And all that I knew were very strong women growing up. So I saw people, I grew up believing that there's nothing that you can do, and therefore you must just get at it. And I think when you look at when I was born 1969, right? My father had 6 girls, right? And he was a very strong advocate of women. So I grew up seeing people as individuals, that you can be everything that you want to be, and that we all have a responsibility in supporting each other to achieve our potential. So when I see people, I see their potentials. I see what we can all do together to make the world a better place. So that's what I see. So I really am, my job is to help as many people as possible, both female as well as male.
Oh, thank you so much. And Carole, who did you see in your early career or growing up that let you think, I can do something different. Yeah. I can reach this height. Yeah. I can dream as much as I would like to, and it's actually possible.
So for me, it's 2 things. One, I did see my family from my grandmother, and just how she ran the family. Being a mother of 8, my grandfather was much, much older, and so retired very early when the kids were small. And so she had to handle almost everything. Really educate the children. And then she was very involved in her community, the church. And so she did almost everything and held the family together, which has continued to this day, despite her demise. And so for me, that was really one of those women I saw like a matriarch. And I thought, you can do it. But I think secondly, I never woke up and felt like I wanted to do all this to get to a certain level. I almost feel like I'm one of those who was thrown in the deep end, and then I either had to swim or to sink. All I knew in my mind, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to do something that was impactful for my country. And so that's what drove me. It was not so much where I needed to get to my career. So I got here I woke up one day and I thought, oops, this is where it was going to end. But I think for me, what was driving me was impact.
Thank you. I'm going to read out a couple of stats talking about how much public support in Kenya and Nigeria what do people feel is important when it comes to seeing women in office. So 72% of Nigerians are comfortable with a woman being head of government, and 75% of Kenyans are comfortable with that. Having a woman as minister, 87% of Nigerians are comfortable with that statistics, and in Kenya it is 89%. And having a woman as the CEO of a major company in Nigeria, 89% of people are comfortable with that idea, and 88% of Kenyans are comfortable. And with CEO of a small or medium-sized company, 89% of Nigerians are comfortable, and 90% of people who are polled in Kenya are comfortable with that idea, which I think is great. We're growing, we're doing very well. We've moved up in the Reykjavik Index for 2025. Kenya moved up to 57 from 52 in 2024, and Nigeria moved up from 57 to 59. So we're making some strides. And I wanted to ask you, Bolaji, with increased visibility, there seems to be a lot more scrutiny, and that is something that women in particular are constantly bombarded with. We are micromanaged, and there's a lot of sometimes negative press, and people worry about being perceived negatively. We worry about managing private and public. And I wanted to ask you if that affects the way you work and how you've managed to ignore, work with, get the help and ideas of stakeholders. How have you managed increased perception once you've moved into a higher role?
Okay, so from my perspective, so I'm a very private person, and finding myself, with public visibility and the fact that it's very easy for people, right? So I'm in finance, and so the first thing people want to test is how knowledgeable are you? How did you get into this position that you're in? So I think the first thing is, as women, we need to first and foremost have a plan. So fortunately, I was in HR, right? And therefore, when I found myself having to act as the CEO of the holding company following the death of the person who had done the transformation, the first thing I did was have a 90-days plan to say, what exactly do I want to do? How do I first and foremost manage publicity to make sure that I'm authentic me? And then how do I also ensure that I'm very true to who I am as a female? And for me, it wasn't just about me just always being in that public domain. It was about also making sure that there were a lot more people with me. So it was more about collaboration. So it wasn't, you wouldn't open the newspaper and the first person you see was me. It was about making sure that I created an opportunity for not just myself, but for everybody else. So that was, the very first thing that it was about, who I was as an individual. And it was also about letting people know that, that here is what I bring to the table. So it was also about making sure that I was willing to learn, right? So, all my days was more in commercial banking. Then I found myself having to manage shareholders and managing, going on, looking for capital, not just in Nigeria, but internationally. And it was, how do you picture yourself? So there were things that I ensured that I remained true to who I was. I ensured that I was not just only pushing my personal brand, but I had aligned my own brand with those of the organization as well. And it was also about making, first and foremost, sure that everybody within the organization, I was carrying them along, because if you don't have the people internally on board with you, then it's very easy for messages to come out. So just going around engaging all employees, that also helped a whole lot, so that when people wanted to say something negative out there were responses based on their interactions to say, here is what she's saying, and this is what it is. It was also about going out there early in the day to share, here is the 3 things that I want to do. So I was focused on not a lot of things, but here are the 3 things that I want to do, and these are the 3 things that you should sort of like judge me. Then that was one way of getting that visibility and not just being concerned about the noise. For the guys in the press, they got a bit frustrated with me because when they throw in negative messages, I just ignored it for a while. And therefore, they were then willing to deal with me on my own terms. So those were some of the things that I created. I created a strategy that I was going to be true to who I was, because post the conversation, it was about also pushing a lot more women, not just only women, but also the men as well. So I was very deliberate in making sure that there was a balance my gender balance wasn't about 60%, but it was just about making sure there were at least 40% of any of the gender that I was pushing at any point in time.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm hearing stakeholder management, I'm hearing ignoring the noise, and I'm hearing being very clear on what your goals are and working with people within the organization to make sure that they understand what the goals are. Okay, excellent. So Carole, as head of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how media in particular and policy can normalize women's leadership as opposed to treating it as like a flight of fancy or something new and exciting. From what you've seen in Kenya, how can media and policy creators work together to normalize women's leadership in a way that doesn't make it seem like it's out of the ordinary?
Yeah. So maybe I can tell you a little bit about what my journey was and how then media and politics can come in. So when I took this job 15 years ago, I was in my early 30s. That time, those statistics you read were not the statistics. The private sector, the capital owners were men. And they were mostly men, mostly average 50s, many 60s and above. And so I was sticking out like a thumb. You know, here comes this young lady in the boardroom and who was not part of the pack. And I think one of the things that I remember, and going with the whole idea of seeing is believing, and I still hold that today, visibility is showing first at the door. And then having the capability to unlock that door, and then having the impact to keep that door open. So what I learned is that I showed up. And so in the boardroom, I would be me and all these men. And so one of the other things I did, I never wore the dark suits because it was important for me, for them to see there was a woman in the room. So while we were doing everything else the same, there were things I was going to do different as a woman, you know, bring in emotional intelligence, bring in intuition into all these conversations about business. And then the capabilities, I knew I was capable. I had the education, and I could do this. But also remember, business associations are basically what we call an intermediate between business and government. So I was not only dealing with government, but I was dealing with government from the top level of the president to everyone else, and only all the arms of government. So you're dealing with the executive, you're dealing with parliament, you're dealing with judiciary, and at the same time, women were also just beginning to penetrate government, you know, and politics. So if you come into a cabinet meeting, maybe you find one or two women. You know, now there are many more because it's been a real campaign about that. The same thing with politics. We had very, very few women. So again, in these same areas, you're sticking out. But what I told myself is that it's my capabilities that bring me in there. And I think that's what media should do a lot when they focus on women in leadership and see the capabilities women bring into the boardroom, bring into the office. But at the same time, again, it's just to walk away from titles. And I was so glad then the business community was very against our culture. The African culture is very big. It's very hierarchical. It's very title-based. But the business community was very not title-based. And that really helped. And so once you entered in a room, you only brought yourself. People, it was first names and you spoke. And I did that even for my office. So we don't do titles in my office. People, it's first names or even abbreviation. And that had really brought that level where everyone is supposed to bring their best into the office, not their titles in the office. And I think when we think about policy and where policy meets and media is to start looking at women from that perspective, away from the gender. But that does not mean that there are not challenges that women come with. Women come, and one of the policies that we really pushed, even as KEPSA and as a private sector, is actually two. Gender mainstreaming, bringing more women into the board. And so Kenya has done very well among the average of women in boards. It's about 32% in the world. Kenya is about 36%. And even in terms of at the CEO level, at the C-suite level, Kenya is doing so much better in terms of average in the world. But to allow that, we needed to do a policy. And so we created a gender mainstreaming policy. But the second thing we did was what we called the breastfeeding substitute bill. And this was to create mother rooms and baby rooms in the offices so that women who were breastfeeding could be able to express their milk, and companies that had space could create children's spaces so these women could continue their career than taking long breaks, but because they needed to do that. And so it also means even if they're bringing their capabilities, so you also understand what are some of the other things that women have to face that men don't face, and especially things like breastfeeding and all that. And so create that space so they bring their capabilities at the same time, be able to deal with the other needs they have that men would not have.
Thank you so much. We have a few seconds, so I'm just going to ask everyone in the room to go to the next poll, which is asking what every single person here, what's one action your institution will take over the next year, the next 12 months, to make women's leadership more visible? The options are setting public targets, funding visibility and sponsorship, changing your how you search and shortlist, tracking media and speaking parity, and if you are not sure yet, that is also an option. I really would like to see, do we have any of the answers up yet? It's really important for people just in general. I like what you said about making sure that your policy within companies makes room for women in more than one capacity. Yes, we want you to come as your best self at work, but we also need to reduce the barriers that come up when women are trying to work as working mothers, the kind of things that mean that women opt out of the workforce. Mm-hmm. And I really think that we are learning to move just beyond having people see women in office and increasing how much we are able to trust those women in office. How we speak about women in media, how we tell their stories, what we're asking them to do, how they show up, what we criticize. Very, very important. And I think the work that you two are doing is incredible. I hope that this unique style hasn't gone over people's heads. I know that we had a kind of brief intermission earlier because the Minister of Justice had to leave, but I really hope that we've learned some really cool and interesting things from these fabulous women who are doing really, really amazing things in West and East Africa. I hope that next year when we come together again, we would have moved up the index because we've taken lessons that we can all work with. This has been an absolute privilege. I hope everyone has had a great time. I know I did. I learned a lot. And hopefully I see you all next year, actually.